All right, we are live. I'm going to give it a little countdown, let people jump on,
Mhm.
and then we will go ahead and get started in just a moment. Let's see. We'll have this ready to go. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, hello. Happy Sunday. As you all join or catch the replay, I am Charisma Cares Travels. And here I teach you all how to travel with or without your kids, because I travel with mine. And I make my money through investing in real estate. So today I have the wonderful Miss Chrishan Wright. Um, Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Charisma. I'm excited.
Yes. So if you all don't know who Chrishan Wright is, you probably know her brand. She is the Blaxit Global brand. I have been following her for years. I was following her before people were actually leaving the States. I think it was back when they started first, well, around that time they were talking about going to Ghana.
hmm
Is that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Blaxit Global started in June of 2020. But you're right, there was like this lead up between the year of the return, which was like 2019, and I think we'll probably get into what 2020 was.
Right. So if you don't know the name, like I said, you know Blaxit Global because you have heard about Blaxit because, yeah, it became very popular after COVID. So for those that don't know, can you tell us a little bit about you, Miss Krishan?
Sure. So I am the creator and founder of Blaxit Global. We're a platform dedicated to empowering and inspiring the diaspora to pursue a life abroad, regardless of where your country of origin is. Some of us have the desire, like myself, it's been a long desire to move abroad and live abroad. And for others, they're realizing that wherever they're living, that there's something more and their curiosity has been sparked. So we have various entities within our platform. We have the Blaxit Global podcast, which Charisma was a guest during this season. We have our community, Blaxit Global Passport, where we have accountability groups and our men's group and workshops and things galore. And then, of course, we have our YouTube channel and Instagram. And other than that, let's see. I like to travel the world, obviously, and I'm a mom of two.
Okay. Tell us, what is Blaxit?
Yeah, what does Blaxit mean? So for me, it means getting out and getting where you feel the most alive. And for everyone else, that's going to mean something very different. But I think it boils down to feeling the most alive.
Okay. So, what made you get to this point of, okay, I'm going to create this brand? What did you see that it's like, we need this? Something is missing.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as I mentioned, I've been on a journey my whole life, really. From a child growing up in the Bronx, I always wanted to, my life plan was to move to New Zealand and be a corporate lawyer when I was 26. And, life happens. And in 2017, I finally made my first solo trip to New Zealand. And that was the country I'd always wanted to live in, right? And so I made that dream a reality for myself and got very emotional when it was time to come back to the States. And at that point, I was feeling like, okay, I've got about, 6 years until my youngest graduates high school and goes off to college. And so I said, okay, 2023 is going to be my year. Made that decision and had been working toward that. New Zealand was the mark and saving, doing all the things. And then, of course, 2020 happened and I had left a job. So my background is in digital marketing. And for many years, I ran digital marketing and led digital marketing for the Advil brand as men and some other brands like Chapstick and things like that I had worked on over the years. And so when I decided and felt like, the world was closing in with everything between the pandemic and of course the civil unrest, I just was feeling depressed in those 3 years, right? I was in 2020. 2023 felt like 30 years away, and I was getting depressed. And I felt like, hey, I have to redirect this energy. I can either give in to the feelings and succumb to the feelings that, are really starting to overtake me, or I can redirect that energy into something positive. And while I had traveled to several countries, I still am in, in the beginning stages. Um, I hadn't really encountered any Black expats with the exception of one trip. And so when, you do a Google search and you're looking for people like you, it'll just throw back results of people that don't look like us. But
Yeah.
I knew that migration and travel has always been part of the Black narrative. And that's when I decided to create Blaxit Global. And like I said, because I'm a digital marketer by profession, my mind just goes to like um, thinking of it as a brand. And I guess I can be okay with being a little transparent here. I'm an introvert by nature.
Okay.
And so the podcast felt safer for me because it was like, oh, nobody has to see my face. I had like issues with myself being on the cover. And then, YouTube scared me at that point. And I figured, oh, you know what? If I think about Blaxit Global as a brand, then I can kind of distance the part of me that's really terrified.
Okay.
And that's how I was able to like lean into it. But I think, the reason why I tell that part of the story is because fear is always there. It's going to be there to talk you out of moving, to talk you out of changing jobs, leaving a bad relationship, anything, right? But if you can learn to overwrite that fear, that's where the magic is. Because if I had given into that, none of everything that followed wouldn't have happened.
Mm, okay. I mean, I feel like you mentioned a couple of things there that I want to kind of dig into,
Mhm.
because you said that you were a digital marketer by trade. Are you still in the digital marketing field?
Yes, I do coaching. So I also do coaching for Rising Tide Capital. They help entrepreneurs start and grow their business. I'm a Rising Tide entrepreneur. And
Mhm,
so I coach other entrepreneurs and help them with their marketing, do
mhm.
some consulting and things like that. But the bigger Blaxit Global becomes, the less, and also because I'm on my own journey,
Yeah.
the less I'm starting to do some other things.
Okay. So did you coin the term Blaxit?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay. I wonder that if you had coined the term, because you see it so much,
Yeah.
but it's been the last couple of years.
Mhm.
So then the other thing that I wanted to talk about was, you talked about your digital marketing background, so it was easy for you to kind of go into that podcast. And then you switched over to YouTube. Well, you added on YouTube, even
Yeah,
though
yeah, it's
you're an
still new.
introvert.
It's still new.
So, with doing all of that, how do you go about planning your own Blaxit?
Ooh, yeah, it's funny because I love balance. Balance
Mhm.
has become more important to me along this journey because as the platform gets bigger, I have to balance, my bandwidth and scaling it in a way that's sustainable first and foremost, and how I structure like the show, the community, etc. But now that I'm closer to this journey, and I'll give you an example. So for this year, I always, pre-record most of my season before I go live, just from a process perspective to keep me sane.
Uh-huh.
But this year, I had to like move up my pre-production and get that out of the way by January. I think I was done recording the season for the most part
Mhm.
because I knew that when I got into this part of the year, and I'm still in season on the podcast, that I didn't want to get overwhelmed, right? I have a community in Black's the Global Passport. And as I mentioned, we have workshops, we have different speakers come in, I do accountability groups. We have one of our guests from a previous season does our men's group. And coordinating, all of that with people in different time zones takes a lot. But then for myself, I'm now actively in planning my Blaxit, which is now Portugal. And I scouted Portugal last year. I had scouted a few countries, and I talked about it on the podcast. It went from New Zealand. My daughter objected because she felt like that was too far while she's in college. So I started looking at other countries, like I did Costa Rica in October of 2021. And then my hard deadline was by April of 2022, I had to find a country or I had to put it on pause until she got into college because I didn't want my journey overwhelming her journey. So in order to like plan, I had to really strategize. And now I'm in, in the active part, right? I've done the FBI check. I've opened up my bank account. I'm on a flight next week, a week after next, to Portugal to find my apartment. And while still, kind of juggling all of these things. But um, for me, it's like making sure that it's important for me to show up as the best version of myself in all aspects. So the podcast will be put to bed in May. The group is becoming to where it's self-sufficient for the most part. We have quite a few, about a third of our members are actually moving this year. And so it's getting to where now I can, finalize these last bits of my journey. And then I'm already planning, like, how we're going to expand in 2024.
Okay. So tell me about so you were going to New Zealand. That was just the
Mhm.
place you absolutely wanted to be.
Yeah.
So you did some scouting trips. Tell me about how a scouting trip works. Because I personally have never done a scouting trip. I just
Really?
go and I just stay if I like it.
I
If
love
I
it.
don't like it, I stay a month and then I leave.
I love it.
That
Yes.
was my scouting trip. But for those that
That
want to
counts.
go
That
real,
counts. Everybody is different. Just like our fingerprints are different, everybody's journey is different. Some people move sight unseen. Some people migrate like you and slow travel, right? It doesn't mean that my version of scouting trip is right or traditional or yours is wrong or vice versa. For me, I think it just defers to like how I look at things.
okay.
And, I had, like I said, since I was a little girl in the Bronx, had always thought about New Zealand. And then, when I went there for the first time in 2017, I was there just about 3 weeks. And then I went again in February of 2020. And that was more for the purposes of a scouting trip. My cousin came along with me and looked at different parts of the country, stayed in a couple of Airbnbs. All along on that journey was looking at like the exchange rate. Of course, just, things that everyone should be doing, understanding some of the history, understanding the government, because governments are different in different countries, right? Government systems. And also, thinking long term about the requirements. A lot of countries have a means test for you to have a certain amount of assets and financials. And so for me, all of the time, before I do a scouting trip is really a lot of legwork. And then once I'm feet on the ground, it's like, okay, where's the things that I like and I want to enjoy? Um, I love New Zealand. New Zealand's always going to be my happy place. I love the Maori people. I love the country, the landscape, everything about it just opens up and lights up my heart space. And honestly, when I had to look at other countries, I wasn't disappointed because I know I can always go down the road and do it later. And there's other reasons why I can't do New Zealand, because it got closer to time and I realized they're not going to let me in anyway. I'm too young for a retirement visa and too old for a work visa. So that kind of took it out. But again, that's the purpose of a scouting trip. But I did have the closest to that feeling when I went to Portugal. I
Okay.
didn't have that feeling when I went to Costa Rica. I definitely felt like uh, it was going to be something where I scouted. I didn't have anything on my agenda, just kind of wanted to do my own routine. But I got bored really easily, realized that I was having some issues with the infrastructure. As a person that has an online brand, that's important to me to have strong Wi-Fi.
Right.
Some creature comforts, like, okay, you can go to a cafe, but like I said, what else am I going to do? Right. And I realized I was not going to be able to fill my time in a meaningful way. I love beaches. Of course, many places have beaches, but I love beaches and museums and cafes and walking and, all of those things. And those ranked high on the list for me. And I feel like, in addition to New Zealand, Portugal checked off those boxes for sure.
Okay. So those were the three countries you visited?
Yeah, and actively scouted. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm up to 16 countries now, but the ones that I actively wanted to scout,
Okay.
those were the ones I zeroed in on.
Okay. What part of Costa Rica?
I went to Puerto Viejo
Okay.
during my stay, and so I stayed there the longest part, and then coming and going, I stayed in San Jose.
Okay. And then what areas did you look at in Portugal? Because I know everybody is looking at Portugal.
Mm. Yeah, that one was a hard one, believe it or not. Because I don't, yeah, at the time I'm better. I'm in a course now, but I didn't speak any Portuguese. And so their system as it relates to an apartment is different. They use a T, T0 to, all the way up. And that basically is how many rooms. So when I scouted last April, during my trip, I stayed in a T0, a T1, and a T2 because they're on the metric system, much like, all of Europe,
Everybody.
and we're not.
Yes.
So I had a hard time I'm a visual person, so I had a hard time, like, conceptualizing what 80 meters was actually in space spatially, or 60 meters, and so I was like, "Okay, is that gonna feel too cramped? Is that gonna feel too spacious?" I stayed in Lisbon, Belém, Porto, and then I visited Cascais, Sintra, and I think there was one more. Yeah, Cascais, Sintra. There might have been another one in there. Oh, Nazaré. Nazaré. Oh my gosh, I love Nazaré. But um, I waffled for many months, and then I finally decided last month where I feel like I want to narrow down my scouting trip, which is the one that I'm leaving in a few days for.
Okay. So let's back up another step.
Yeah,
So
go for it.
before you actually went to these places for your scouting trip,
Mhm.
what was the research that you did to say, okay, because you love New Zealand, but what research did you do that says, okay, I need to try out these countries. I need to try Costa Rica. I need to try Portugal. And what did you look into that said, okay, I'm going to actually go and scout
You ready for this one?
this?
I listened to the Blaxit Global podcast.
I know you learn so much from your guests, don't
I
you?
did. I had my guests. I have had, like, because you've been a guest, right? I have been so blessed and fortunate that I have had amazing guests, right? Amazing in their own right. Some of my guests have been on episodes of House Hunters. It's one of our guests is actually Mrs. Universe. And so what I have learned is, I asked the questions on the podcast and it would spark different things that I hadn't even thought of. And obviously, as I'm editing the show, I'm re listening to the conversations. And that's how Portugal got on the list. I had Shar, who's the creator of the expat app. She mentioned Portugal in our conversation and how her life had transformed, and that, raised it to the top of the list. I also had my moderator at the time, Victoria, who was on an episode of House Hunters. She's in Orvieto, Italy, and I had several guests that have been in Italy, and that was going to be the fourth. So if Portugal didn't cut it, the last one I was going to check out was Italy, but Portugal did it, and then Italy came off the list, much to their disappointment. But yeah, it's really been the conversations that I've had with people on the show that have sparked my curiosity in different ways. And then from there, I do like more research, like I said, in that list. So, what's going to allow me to get back to the States in a reasonable amount of time? Europe does that because I can get back to the East Coast in about 6 hours on a direct flight. My mom is in Florida. My daughter's going to be in school on the East Coast. My son's also on the East Coast. Um, and then, for me, Portugal is close proximity to the continent of Africa. That's been on my list for a long time. That was actually one of my travel plans for 2020. I was going to go to the jazz festival in South Africa, and then pandemic messed that up.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's really been that's been the gift of having this platform and this show, is that I get people who either I invite onto the show or who have followed and want to extend an invitation, and that have been so transparent in sharing their journeys. It's been a tremendous gift.
Yeah, I think that, when I first started thinking about leaving, I didn't get on YouTube. I don't know if YouTube existed at the time, but I know I wasn't on YouTube. I was that person that was just odd. Like, what do you mean you want to live outside of the United States? Like, people don't do that. Like, why would you do that?
Mhm.
So, that's what it was at that time. And I think that, over the last couple of years, we've seen so many people, especially people that look like you and I. And
Mhm.
I would just go to say so many women that look like you and I, because I don't see a lot of men.
Yeah, yeah, they're out there, and every season I make sure I have. I always do 10 episodes, sometimes more, never less. But every season I always have at least one male.
Mhm.
I think this season I was fortunate enough to have two, and they're out there. They just aren't out there the way women are in
Okay.
terms of, being overt and sharing their story and sharing their journey. Sometimes they need a little bit more nurturing to get them ready for the show, but I think just, we're just different. We're
Yeah.
different.
But I think just seeing us all over at this point, we're on YouTube, seeing you all on Essence,
Mhm,
seeing you on TV shows,
mhm,
newscasts. I mean, Black women are just all over
yeah,
showing us, yes, we do travel. So
mhm,
now when we tell our families we're leaving, they're like, nobody does that. I'm like, actually, it's plenty of people that do this. See, right here. Let me send you a link or
yep.
two or three.
Yeah. Yeah, because when I was, 2017, when I made the decision, I only told a select few people at that time, and it was a lot of pushback. It was the fear, as I mentioned earlier. Fear can really paralyze you, and also I think depending on the person who's, projecting their fears onto you, it can
Mhm.
be an added weight. But now, that I leaned into YouTube, not just as, a platform for myself, but, my daughter and I, especially during lockdown, we would spend, part of our time in the evenings looking at different, YouTubers and influencers that she would follow. And I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I should like look at, different Black expats and things like that. And,
Mhm.
I think that's probably how I stumbled upon Stephanie, and
Yeah.
Stephanie Perry, and she was on in season 2, I believe, and Roshida and I've Adalia, and we're all now in this collective together. Um, but yeah, it's a powerful platform, the internet, and representation matters. And
Yes.
for me, Blaxit Global, the podcast, is squarely highlighting the voices and stories of Black expats. Um, I've only had one guest this season that is not like an expat. They've traveled. So I've had Rich and Regular, who have this great book, Cashing Out: How to Win the Wealth Game by Walking Away. And I had them on because their book is so amazing, their platform is so amazing. And as you know, like, as a traveler, as an aspiring expat, as an expat, money moves everything. And
Yeah.
if you can't get your money right, like nothing else is going to work out. And so to hear and see, a Black couple, even though I'm a single person, like their message resonated with me. I listen to their podcast every Monday. So for me, having people firsthand narrative tell about what their lives were like before they left, whether it be America, the UK, Canada, wherever, as long as you are of the diaspora, it's important to have our stories be the fabric and the narrative that we craft rather than what has been for so many years people changing the narrative, whitewashing the narrative, trying to suppress or twist our words. You can't deny when you hear these stories that these people have made their decisions and journeys. And even in that, at the same time, you can also hear the commonality, irrespective of country of origin, in that they faced, in some cases, discrimination, microaggressions, frustrations, etc. There's also a common thread as you listen to the show.
Yeah. I would say that. I mean, you see all different things, but there is that commonality.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go to the comments because for some reason, StreamYard and YouTube are not connecting. So let me see.
Yeah,
So
no worries.
insightful travel, she said, you both give me the confidence to change my life. So happy I found you both. So it's just some hellos. Hey, so I wanted to let everybody know I figured out how to pull the comments. So if you do have
Okay.
questions now, you can go into the chat and put your questions in there, and I will ask Miss Chrishan your question.
Yeah, please fire away. I love it.
Yes, but for some reason they weren't connecting.
Yeah.
So just wanted to say hey to everybody out there in YouTube land and throw your questions in there while we're talking. But yeah, I do really think that you all have created this this, I don't even know what to call it. It's just like you see these women that are doing all of the things that you want to do. And for those of us that already had it in the back of our mind and we had a plan, like for me,
Mhm.
most people know my story that follow me. But I have my daughter. She's older at this point. She's 20, so she's a whole adult.
Well, full on adult. I know my son's gonna be 23 in a few months. And I'm
Right.
like, he was there the other day, and I'm like looking up at him.
Yes. Whole adult working,
Right?
doing her life or whatever. So she's doing that, but I also have an 11-year-old, and my son has special needs. He uses crutches, sometimes he uses a wheelchair, some mild autism, things of that nature. And but his diagnosis is KIF1A, so it is a rare disorder that they say gets worse over time. So I had decided that because my daughter, she wasn't moving nowhere. Let's be very clear. Like, it was not happening. My daughter was in band. She was, and for those of you that are band parents or have ever been in the band, you eat, drink,
Yeah.
live band.
Yes. I
Like,
was in the band when I was in school.
Like, people thought that my daughter got a car at 16 for her. No, she got a car at 16 for me because I did not want to get out of bed anymore at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to pick her up from school because the bus went out to the other city and it just got back.
Wow.
And what I knew about Georgia law, where we are, as long as she was driving to or from a school event, she could drive during those hours. Otherwise, you couldn't drive. Well, that was all I needed. I needed her to hurry up and get a car. So being in the band, I'm sure you understand that life. So my daughter wasn't going anywhere. That was just not even a conversation worth having. Like, we did our vacations. We've always been a vacationing family. My mom took me on my first cruise at 16.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, back then people didn't do that, especially us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true.
So, we've always been a vacationing family. But to say that I was going to uproot my daughter, kind of like you're saying, and take her in middle school, and not in middle school, in high school, that just wasn't something I was going to do. I kind of feel like if you're going to do like what we now call world schooling and travel with your kids, elementary, middle is a good time to do that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's my opinion. Like, what do you think?
For sure. I've had guests on the show, several who have worlds or in the process of world schooling their children. And you're right. It's like there's a sweet spot age wise that lends itself better. But once you start getting into the 13, 14 year, if you want to try to introduce that, it's much harder. I can't say that it's impossible, right? I didn't world school my children, but for one of my guests I know who left during the pandemic from New Jersey to Italy, and her son was about 12, and she's Jamaican, her husband's Italian, and their son was born in the States. Even though they made the transition, that first year or so was really rough because that age is very, you're really on the cusp.
Yeah. And you have to assimilate. Like, I
Yes.
feel like those teenage years, you're already awkward and you're trying to
Mhm.
figure out yourself. So trying to figure out yourself and the community around
Yeah.
you,
Yes.
I feel like could be really tough. So I had made a decision that, when my daughter graduates, and I let her know in like eighth, ninth grade, when you
Mm.
graduate, me and Cam, we're going to start traveling the world.
That's
And
awesome.
we got, and she would be like, all right, mom. But all right, mom came a little bit clearer by the time she was in 10th grade. You
Once they
know,
see your boxes packed in them bags, it's like, oh,
right.
so you were serious.
Right. So what was a dream was starting to become a reality.
Wow.
And, it was like, okay, I want to make sure she's settled a little bit before we
Mm.
travel. But yeah, so my thing was when she graduates, we're going to go travel. And as we got closer and then COVID hit, it was, everybody has that bittersweet with COVID, because it's a little life changing.
Mhm.
And the way you went in for most people is not the way you came out.
Very true.
And seeing all of you women, that Black women especially, that were already doing this and you were talking about it and you were educating us. I mean, that's when I found Stephanie Perry as well. And I was like, wait a minute, she's talking to me. Like,
Exactly.
my background is nurse practitioner. She's in the medical field. And,
Mhm.
it was just like this. I had heard of Blaxit. I had seen that.
Mhm.
And but I hadn't heard about like everybody else
Yeah.
that were doing it. So it's been amazing to watch you all and your transformations and
Yeah.
everything that you've gone through and everything that you've shown us how you do these different things. You bring on these guests, and it's so funny if you all go to at Blaxit Global, which is Chrishan site and everything, because she has IG, Facebook, YouTube. It's all the same thing. If
Mhm.
you go on there and you read all of the people she's interviewed everybody that's anybody. Like,
Pretty much. And there's, I'm already planning season 6 in my head. And it's been a blessing. And it's so interesting. I was saying this in our accountability group the other day. From the time I came up with the idea of Blaxit Global, and I had conversations with my friend Kim, who's the host of the Sisters Connect podcast,
mhm,
and to the time that I recorded, or no, from the time I thought about it to the time I went live was
uh-huh,
3 weeks. And as you know, it was lockdown. We couldn't travel. I had just gotten back from New Zealand, a couple months prior. And again, I didn't know any Black expats. And so to then concept an idea for a podcast and find a guest, my first guest was Deirdre Amola, who was who is in Bali, Indonesia, 13-hour time difference, and to convince people to get on a mic and tell their story to someone they've never seen before.
Mhm.
um, it was, like I said, when I look back on it now, I'm so glad I didn't overthink it, because if I gave into the, I'm not an expat, I'm still in the States, or, I've never podcasted before, all these other things, would have missed out on, the things that, again, inspired my own journey, and then subsequently, have inspired, hundreds around the world. There's thousands of people that have listened to the show now. It's like last time I looked, we were at about 65, nearing 70,000 downloads. It's crazy, you know. And it's been a wonderful journey, and I look forward to, I don't know if I want to call it a 2.0, but once I'm in Portugal and I'm actually in the new
Yeah.
country, I have big plans that I'm already kind of like seeding. But I can't say enough about the people that I've had the honor of listening to their stories.
Yeah, because it's so funny because when you get in this community, right? You really get into this community. So you start to have these friends on Facebook and they're expats. Like, and then it's you don't meet them in person until you're in that country, but you
Yes.
know them from Facebook. And you feel like you've known them forever. Like these are my sisters. I know
Yes.
her. I see where you have, and I'm bad with names, but when I see it in writing, I know it. I seen where you have, it's a lady, she does world schooling and she does a cooking course.
Yes, Karen Ricks. Yes.
Yeah, so you have her. I see where, I see all of them. Of
Yeah.
course, you have the people that run in your circles,
Mhm.
Stephanie and Roshida,
Mhm.
but all of the people that are on my Facebook, I'm like, oh, let me learn more about them.
Mhm.
But what's so funny is we only see a glimpse when they're on our Facebook. But when we actually listen to their story,
Yeah.
I feel like we can really resonate with, like, she has a story that's
Yeah.
similar to mine.
Yes. And it's
And
so powerful because it demystifies, like, the moving abroad is a process, right? You take your stuff,
mhm,
figure out what you're going to get rid of, ship it, whatever, get rid of it, buy some stuff somewhere. That's a process. What is the part that's equally, well, really the complicated part is the emotions. It's
mm,
the emotions about, is this the right decision? Is this the right country? If there's a different language involved, how am I going to communicate? Time zones, right? How am I going to support myself? Family, friends, how am I going to keep connected? Children, and then the roller coaster of, even once you get there, and I'm starting to prepare myself for that, right? Visioning about, what is it that I'm going to do once I'm there? All of these years since 2020, right, that I've been public with my journey, it's been the lead up, the build up, right? And I always close the season. My part of the journey is such a small part of the podcast because I want the focus to be on my guests. But I give, a little update of where I am. I recognize in 2023 that I'm more of the kind of my story is becoming more apparent. But then, what am I going to do once I'm in Portugal, right? If I don't start to think about that, the commonality is you take you wherever you go. So if you have drama in your home country and you think that hopping on a plane is going to be the answer to your problems, it's not. If you're bad with money in your home country and you think that, oh, if I take myself to, a different place, that's going to solve all the problems. No, you have to do a lot of internal work, a lot of mindset work, being clear on your why, and also spending time on what it is that you absolutely want to get out of this part of the journey, because there will be a time that you're in this honeymoon period, right? And the patina will wear off, and then you'll just be living, right?
yeah.
And if you don't pay enough attention to checking your own expectations, you can set yourself up for letdown.
And You just answered the question. Insightful Travels asks, how do you deal with the emotions of it all
Mhm.
through your journey? And you literally just answer that. The part I want to add on is when you get there, all of that stuff that you said comes with you,
Yes.
because I can remember getting to Costa Rica, Puerto Viejo, and I just still, well, no, it was Panama first, and I still had stuff that was unresolved that I felt like if I just pushed this deep down inside and packed this suitcase,
Mm.
once I land in another country, I'll be fine because it's beautiful there. And they
Mhm.
have beaches and they have different people and food and this and that and the other. And what happened was now that I didn't have all of these, all my regular people around me, now that it was just me and my son, it was, I had to deal with those emotions. They started
Mhm.
coming up. I kept trying to push them back down,
Mhm.
but they kept coming up.
Yeah.
So, like you said, you're gonna have to deal with those. Now, it may be nicer to deal with those on the beach
Yes.
than it is to deal with them at home.
I
But
will deal with them on the beach with the drink in my hand.
right, they come. Those emotions are a little handled a little different when you have a coconut in your hand.
Of course.
But you still have to handle them.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they come with you. You still
Yeah.
have to take care of that. And sometimes that brings you right back to the States to do that.
Mhm. It's interesting. I was having this conversation with my mom the other day, um, and the you talked about the pandemic and a lot of the things that where you started and where you came out could be different. I lost several family members during the pandemic, and but I also was blessed in having, this platform, right? And so what I have learned is that two things can be true. It can be true that it is a rough go, but it can be true that there's beauty in the journey. And so it can be true that you have problems or issues or, points of friction. But what I haven't seen is that suppressing can only work for so long. I've had things that I've had laid dormant or intentionally buried for a long time. And I have been, the gift for me was the solitude and the safe space to start to unpack that. And
Mm,
for me, it was, how do I want to go into this next chapter? Do I want, because the healing process never ends, right? But what I wanted to do was I wanted to do the work while I'm here so that I wasn't potentially bringing back the same negative patterns or maladaptive behaviors to another destination, or have everything bubble up and I get, triggered, bubble up to the surface out of the blue. And then I don't even know how to put myself back together or even who to ask for help because I'm in a strange land. Right. And so I had to think about, okay, Krishan, how are you going to best set yourself up for success and recognize that if I do the work, the hard work, and it's been many years, right? Now the payoff is so much greater than the pain that you inevitably go through. We cannot expect to not, we like to try to avoid it as human beings, but we can't avoid pain. You're a mom of two. I'm a mom of two, right? You have beautiful children that you've brought into this world that each have their own, unique gifts and talents and abilities, right? But guess what? You also labored through pain to bring them into this world, right? And so there's beauty that can come out of the pain. And so sometimes you have to endure, but it is important to observe the lesson. And so much sometimes, and myself included, have wanted to subvert that because we live in a time, where We like instant gratification, right?
Mm,
We want to click a button and have something delivered in a couple minutes or
mm,
hours. We want to have that, whatever, binge watch or something. We want things as, what is it? I want to have the 6-figure business, the 7-figure business, right? Like you see all these people
yeah.
going online. Oh, I started my business yesterday and now I'm a 7-figure business.
Right. Right.
We've been conditioned to have that level of expectation, right? I want to lose 30 pounds in 30 days. Like we're just inundated with that expectation, whether we're conscious of it or not. And what I'm really a proponent of is slowing things down and starting to do the work to question, where is that expectation coming from? Where is that belief system coming from? And it's not easy work, right? And it's not saying you have to do it all the time because there's a right time to do it. But recognizing that if you choose to do that work, you will, one, I think, discover aspects of your life, your history, your journey that you may see patterns that you weren't even aware of because everybody has blind spots. You'll find things that you may want to do differently. And for me, the gift has been the honest look at my own blind spots and my own times in my life where I've been an active participant in my own suffering.
Mm, mm, yeah. I definitely can see that emotional journey.
Hmm.
And, I think that's the difference when you plan. You say, okay, I'm going to work on the emotions. I'm going to work on the psyche. I'm going to work on those things. Or you do like I did and say, all right, I'm out of here. No,
You can do that too, though. Like you can work on it and still get on the plane.
like, it was like I planned it in my head,
Yeah.
but then it was just like, all right, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Something happened and it was like, I wanted to go anyway, so I'm
Yeah.
gone.
Hmm.
And, I do think that there is only but so much planning we can do, though.
Oh, yes. Say that again.
Because by
Lord,
the
say that again.
time I got to my fourth country, this was my fourth month. I went to 4 countries in 4 months.
Wow. That is next level. Okay. Wow.
And people say, they like to watch me because I'm so open.
Yes, you
Because
are.
I did a YouTube because I was just distraught. I was like, this is for the birds. I don't know what these people on YouTube are talking about. This is so wonderful. This is so amazing. And I did a video about failing as an expat. Was
Mm.
it time for me to go home? Did I just completely destroy the dream?
Ooh.
This isn't what I thought it was going to be. I got to get this water bottle to fill up my water. It doesn't just automatically come out the refrigerator. I got to pump the water. I need to send myself money because I lost because the thing ate my debit card. I got a Western Union myself. I didn't know how to use Western Union. Had never even used Western Union.
Yeah.
It was like the debit machines weren't working. Everything is slow. So it is not a microwave society when
Yeah.
you leave the United States.
You got that
Your
right.
Amazon Prime, if you can get it, takes about a week or two.
Yeah.
So guess what? You got to really want it. Because if you don't really want it, you're not going to order it. I save so much money on Amazon because it doesn't take a week or two. It was just so many things logistically, things
Yeah.
that you wouldn't even think would be a big thing
Yeah.
that was going on. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I remember when the lady I was like, there's no more water. And she was like, oh, you just give the guy some dollars. I was like, what are you talking about? I give the guy some dollars. What do you mean? Like, she's upset with me and I'm upset with her because it was really a matter of I'm not from the Dominican Republic. I
Mm-mm.
don't know how they do things. She's not from the States. She doesn't know how we do things. And it was one of those things where it was all beauty when I was laying on the beach, but when it was time to live the life,
That's when you learn. You're like, wait, why is the bank line around the building and we gotta wait like 3 hours to get in and all of that? Yep, yep.
it's
That's what
different when
changes.
you stay in the hotel.
Hmm.
It's different when you do a week in the Airbnb than
Yes,
when you do a month plus
yes,
there, when you have to go grocery shopping,
yes.
when you have to cook and realize this place don't have an oven.
Or in Costa Rica, my wake up call was like, wait, I can't flush things. Wait,
You can right.
there are things that come out of me that need to be flushed.
And I was like, I'm
How is this
flushing
gonna
it.
work?
I'm flushing it. Like, I'm sorry. I'll try not to flush certain things, but certain things are going to get flushed.
Yeah, I was
Like,
like, wait, what do you mean?
like you don't want me to flush. And I had a grandmother that wouldn't even throw her hair in the trash from the comb.
Right?
Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, and you don't want me to flush this?
Yes, yes. And I'm like, I don't understand this, And so there's this, I think it humbles you in a way, right?
Yes.
To understand that in other parts of the world, things operate differently and you will be humbled on this journey, right? Like, and I think it also tests you to see how bad do you want it.
Yes. I mean, I had a client that said, well, I want to buy in South Africa. That's where I
Mhm,
always wanted to live. And I was like, you want to buy right away? And she
mhm,
said, yeah. I said, I will caution you not to do that unless you're buying for investment purposes.
mhm.
Sometimes where we think we want to live is not necessarily where we really want to live. It
Yeah.
really takes a good 6 months to realize after that honeymoon period wears off, because the beach town is wonderful
Mhm.
until you're tired of the beach town.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we're like, where are the real stores at? Like,
Yes.
why do I have to go so far away to see a movie?
Yeah, yeah.
It's those, like you said, Puerto Viejo is wonderful.
Mhm.
I tell everybody you have to visit Puerto Viejo. It is
Yes.
absolutely amazing. But after a while, you
Mm.
get tired of going to Hot Rocks at the corner.
Exactly. Getting a tuk tuk, and I'm just like, or the monsoon rain. I had to throw my sneakers away. The howling monkeys keeping me up like half
At
the night.
5:30, 6 o'clock a.m. every morning,
Woo! You can set your watch and
the
walk in.
geckos.
Yeah, yep. And then like I remember I had to be in because I generally don't go out at night because most of the time I travel alone, and it was like 4:30. You had to be, or I chose to be inside because there's no street lights and it is pitch black. And I'm like, I am
Ooh,
not walking through this jungle and pitch
yep,
black. I was like, no, that is not a safe decision.
right.
So it was just, I was just like, yeah, I don't think this is for me.
Yep,
It wasn't. But that's okay, right? It doesn't mean what didn't work for me or you isn't going to work for someone else or
right,
that it is going to work. So, we're just as unique as our own DNA. And so I always tell people don't worry about, I mean, it's a data point, right? Listening to somebody's, journey or some research, but you.
yeah,
So go explore. And you may have gone on vacation to your point, but then when you go and you actually strip away all of those things and choose to sit in for a week, nothing on the agenda, no excursions, just like your day to day, what it's going to really
mhm,
look like. Are you filling your time in the way that you want to, or are you finding friction, and where are those friction points, and are those the things that are deal breakers for you?
right,
And for a lot of us, I think I'm safe and if I don't like to talk in absolutes, but for many of us, I think it's something that we haven't even been afforded the opportunity to experience
Exactly.
because life keeps you on this hamster wheel. And if you're fortunate enough to have a week off from work or maybe even two, right? You've done the cruise or you've done the beach or you've done these little like moments, or you're in, and I speak for myself, a prolonged period of survival mode
Mm,
and you've gotten used to that as your baseline. And so the idea of thinking about what it is that you want, and maybe you've been wedded to an identity either through work or through relationships as a, girlfriend, wife, mother, whatever, right? Child, caring for an aging parent, whatever that is, that you haven't even given yourself permission to think, or you've kind of suppressed and put your needs behind. And I would say if that rings true for you, this is your time to start exploring that and get back to that time where many of us can relate to in our lives where, we thought we could be the president of the United States, an astronaut, a teacher, and a supermodel all in the same day, right?
mm,
Like give yourself permission to dream and
yeah.
play and just do whatever where, you know, take the limits off, the guardrails off. And if you do that enough, you will find what lights you up.
Yep. That, the ability to dare to dream.
Mhm.
Yeah. KF says not being able to flush certain things sounds like a good trade off to avoid getting shot for walking down the street.
Yeah, there you go.
I would agree to that, which is why I still leave.
Yep.
And every
America
country,
be American.
right? Every country and every city in every country won't have those issues.
Yeah,
So you just
yes.
have to know what things work for you and what things don't. Now they give me the little bottle of water and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
I can tell you when my gas is running low because
Mhm.
some places you have to get the gas.
Yeah.
I
Oh
know gas
gosh,
is
yeah.
running low.
Yeah.
I know the bottle, but I think that transparency a lot of times when I do my YouTube, and the reason I started my YouTube was for my son to look back on his
Mhm.
journey. And
Mhm.
as I started talking about my part of the journey, it helps me to look back and see where how far I've come, you
Wow.
know. And I think a lot of people are like, people don't tell you this, people don't share this with you, people only want to tell you about the seven-figure salary that you
Mhm.
mentioned. They
Mhm.
started their business today and next month they now have a seven-figure salary.
Yeah.
you know Nobody wants to share the things in between that happens, and I think that's important because those
Mhm.
are steps to get to a certain place.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you were saying, you've been on this journey. You were supposed to be in Portugal a couple of years ago. I was supposed to be in Africa a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
That is just not the way it happened.
Yeah. Life is gonna life, and you don't know, nobody has a crystal ball, right?
Yep.
So we talk, or the media, will do its own thing. You think about the potential of a recession or what's gonna happen in 2024 and all that other stuff. Those things are out of your control, right?
Right.
But the things that are in your ability to control are your emotions, how you react, how you respond. Like I haven't watched TV, the news since July of last year, and that's intentional. Your finances, whether it's starting a side hustle, figuring out how to pivot into remote work or an online business, or etc. And getting looped into the community is critical. You know,
Yes.
it's it I didn't realize, especially as I said, and I always say, right, as an introvert, my solitude is something that I cherish. But what I didn't realize was that um, I was missing the connectedness of community, and I created the thing that was missing for me. And now, I have this wonderful community within Blaxit Global Passport and our extended platform where, people are in the community, they need information, or like I said, we bring in different speakers and everything like that. Community has made it possible to have a softer landing. I know that when I went to Portugal last year and I knew Shar, right? I had never met her. When I had her on the podcast, I think it was maybe 2020 when I recorded the episode. I didn't meet her till 2 years later, right? And
Mhm.
through her, I met, Heather and the Black in Portugal team, right? And so now there's this, like I said, this fabric, and I know I'm going to have a softer landing because between them and the people that I've met over the time, and it's expanded. And I like you and I mentioned before we went live yesterday, I had a Portuguese attorney, Sandra Gomes Pinto, on my platform to talk about the legal aspects. That came out of creating Blaxit Global, and Condé Nast approaching me to write an article on retiring in Portugal. Right? She read it, wanted to talk. It's like these are the things that enable us to have a softer landing, so that when we're there and we're trying to figure out who should I talk to for legal assistance? Is there a realtor that we can trust? All of these things, that there are people that have walked that journey before that can support you. And that's the best path forward. That's kind of like the cheat code. It's not going to keep you from having your own issues along the way, but at least you don't have to feel like inundated and overwhelmed in a process that is inherently overwhelming, right? It just will take some of that off to know that there are people who are doing this with you.
That I think that's really important. I think we downplay how important community is,
Mhm.
especially when you go to a different country. It took me a minute to realize what I found that I was missing in
Mhm.
certain countries was community. It may be that because I would just get up and go to the next country, I didn't necessarily know where the expats were. And when I left, I was like, I want to be like a local. I'm not leaving the country to be with other Americans because why would I do that? Why wouldn't I just stay here? Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, I lost that attitude very quick.
You sound like
Yeah,
I was a few years ago. I was like, why would I even want to do
right.
that? And now I'm like, where my people at?
Right. That's where you start. And it's funny because when I made that comment, or I think I did a video, but whatever it was, I put it in Facebook. I got so much slack for it. Like people were
Really?
so upset that I said I wanted community. And you
Mhm.
know what I feel like people don't understand is, they had that same the people that were with me understood me, but the
Mhm.
people that weren't had that same thought process that we had in the very beginning. Oh, why would I go and da 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 da? Me wanting community does not mean that I don't want I don't want to be with the locals. I have
Mhm.
friends in Mexico that are my best friends. When I had my car accident, they did everything to help me. They were absolutely amazing. Like I love them. If we go back, it's like, come stay with us, Charisma. They're kids, they play with Cam. I mean, I love them. But
Mhm.
there's something to be said about somebody that you can relate to one on
Yes.
one. You
Mhm.
all started in the same place,
Mhm.
and they may be steps in front of you, they may be feet
Mhm.
in front of you, or miles,
Yeah.
but it's something about being able to do a brunch.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
they tell me I'm one of the brunchingest brunch people you will ever know. I will do a brunch in a heartbeat. But you know what? I need somebody like you that's going to understand why I want to do a brunch on Saturday
Mhm. Yeah.
and what that really means.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, it really has nothing to do with food.
Yeah, no, it's community. It's community. And you're right. It's both ways. It's finding like-minded expats that you have that common interest and connection with, especially if you're somewhere where you're learning the new language,
Mhm.
because that can just be challenging. And then also the locals, this is their country, and they too sometimes, depending on the country, are willing to help. Right? They want people to have wonderful experiences in their country. They want to show off their culture, right? And
Right.
so I would also recommend that people especially if you're moving to a place or considering a place where you don't know the language, is to connect with locals because they take pride, in their country. And again, it's something that can be very foreign to us as Americans because the people that have that level of pride can sometimes be challenging, right?
Yeah.
And so that is something that has been foreign to us. Like when I go to, Greece, for example, there's a commonality when I've gone to, other countries where, people rally and they support, whether it's a holiday or the government. There's just a different vibe than, in the United States. I think patriotism here has gotten very politicized and divisive. And so sometimes people may think that, oh, I don't want to talk to somebody because, they're going to put their own philosophies and things like that. And I think that it's just very different. I think there's a sense in culture and commonality that people want to invite and share with you and help you along with your journey. It was interesting. Yesterday, I have a friend that lives in Portugal, and we met online in a course a couple years ago, and then we met in person last year. And she messaged me yesterday and kind of was like, "Oh, where are you in the updates?" And so she was telling me she has an apartment and an expat. I'm not sure what country the woman was from, but had literally just moved there, not even a week yet, and had a bike accident, an e-bike accident, and was knocked unconscious, had to go to the hospital, right? Doesn't speak the language, had to, the whole insurance thing. And she was telling me like the community was able to rally and support. She was able to step in and speak Portuguese, right, to communicate and translate on her behalf. There were people in like a Facebook group that, were able to help, navigate the situation for her. But I think that was the benefit of being looped into a community because we go in thinking this, adventure is coming, but there's also things that happen in real life to us. And,
Mhm.
you're going to get sick, or someone in your family might get sick back home, or you may get homesick, or somebody passes away. There's, and those are, negative things, of course, but there are also positive things. There's birthdays you might miss, weddings, graduations, whatever, right? And that's where you can lean on someone else who can say, "Hey, you know what? I'm really, sorry," or "How can I be there for you as you're going through this process?" Don't discount community. Mm-mm. That's when you're missing out big time.
Yeah, Brown Girls Trade too. She says community has been a huge for me. I've in turn left breadcrumbs for others to help them transition more comfortably.
Mhm.
And that's true. Like last year, my Thanksgiving was in Mexico City, with a community of other expats.
Mm,
And I remember, the first year I left, my Christmas was in Colombia, and I didn't know other expats. So although you would think it was this great magical time, it was me and both my kids were with me. It just lacked something.
mm,
And it was interesting because I spent it with my mom, my sister, pretty small knit family, but they felt the lacking on their end the same way we did on our end.
mhm,
So, it's things like that, that if you have a little more community when you bring it together, you're still going to feel that pull from your family or your friends giving or whatever it is that you do. But you also realize you're in the company of other people that, love, experience things the same way you're experiencing it as well. So, Regina said, in my opinion, as American, we are about the individual. What I am learning on this journey of wanting to leave the US, you need community abroad. Thank you for reinforcing this. Yeah, I don't think we really value the culture in America. It's just
mhm,
like you said, it's the division,
mhm,
and you can't even really speak up about your own stuff without kind of being attacked. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, are we surprised really? Because we walk around, I don't know, maybe it's clear because you spend a lot of time outside of the country, but it, I mean, if you think about it, right? Some of us have gone to schools with the names of Confederate soldiers, right? And or statues or flags, right? That hearken to a past that for them they have this sense of patriotism and pride. And for us, it's a reminder of grief and sorrow that still has not been, acknowledged, apologized for, or repaired in any meaningful way. And so I think the fissure continues to get bigger because of that lack of acknowledgement. It's not to say that other cultures and other parts of the world haven't had their own level of history that's negative, but where I see the difference is there's an acknowledgement.
yeah,
I have not yet gone to Germany, but I also know that if I were to go to Germany, I'm not going to encounter any tributes or anything to Hitler, right? Or the
true.
Nazis, right?
This is
But
true.
for us, these jokers running around with Confederate flags or scaling the Capitol and doing all this, it's the same thing, right? We have on our money the faces of presidents that were people who had our ancestors enslaved. And so for me, when I think about, the culture here, are there good things about America? Sure, I'm not going to dispute that. I mean, I got a good education. I made my money and things like that. Yeah, sure. But I also know that that doesn't absolve America from what it has done and continues to do, in a way that they've never acknowledged and continue to try to dismantle our history, our identity, our trauma. And that's the part that I feel like, we're still on the precipice of a reckoning. And until we as America gets honest about it, and also I would say the larger international community starts to call America on its,
Right.
then we will continue to keep chasing our tail and having the same discussions.
I don't think I realized how much of a bubble we live in America until I started living overseas.
Mm.
It's that bubble that when you live overseas, you begin to see just how bad, like how bad America is when you live here. But when you live overseas, you like, ooh, y'all a little. I did one thing where I said, "Is America ghetto?" I'm like, y'all a little ghetto. Y'all just can't keep nothing together. Every time I see something about America, y'all got a shooting or stabbing, people killing people. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to go back there. It's dangerous.
Just like we put warnings on, oh, don't travel to Mexico and blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you, they put warnings about America too. They
Exactly.
talk
I'm
about
like,
gang violence, racial violence, the gun situation. Like, don't get it twisted. It's
domestic
just like
terrorism.
it's America is good at slogans and this level of narcissism where it's like, oh, I'm going to keep you in the eye of the hurricane and swirling so fast, and your life is going to have to keep going so fast just to keep trying to keep up. And what I think has happened with the pandemic was, everybody had to do a full stop. And for some people, that hamster wheel or that hurricane stopped spinning just enough for people to see that there was something on the other side of the chaos that has been in their existence. And when I went into New Zealand in 2017, like that was my first solo trip. I go big or go home type of person. I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm going to go halfway around the world, 29-hour flight, right? And I said, the only thing I did not want to do for the first solo trip was I didn't want to go to a country that didn't speak English. I wasn't ready for that quite part of the challenge now. I don't have an issue, but for the very first one. And so but I wanted to spend time with the Maoris. And so maybe halfway through my trip, I went to Rotorua, and it was, people would come up to me, and of course, when they hear my accent, right, they know I'm American. And this was right coming out of the presidential election, and they're like, "What's wrong with America? Is America okay?" Right? I worry about America. And I was just like, yeah, I'm worried too. Can I stay? Right. And then I had gotten pulled over, right, twice in, I think it was like a couple days or a week. And I didn't realize some countries, right? There's seasons where they get an influx of tourists, and that's when they really do like the crackdown. And so I got there maybe the third day of the new year. So they're in holiday season, right? And of course, my New York City lead foot does not know like miles per hour versus kilometers. So I'm just ding, right? So rightfully so, I got pulled over. The second time was not right, but whatever. So when I get back to my host in the Airbnb, and he was Maori, and he's like, "Oh, did you notice that the police don't have guns?" And I said, "Oh," and then I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right, he didn't have a gun." And he said, "Oh yeah, they won't kill you like they do in your country." I was like, well.
I, I mean, but they will kill you in our country. Yeah.
Exactly. Or when I was in Greece, and I remember we had just gotten to the hotel, and we were like, "Oh, we're hungry." And we asked, the concierge, and they said, "Oh, the place was like 2 blocks away," but their version of blocks was different than like our concept of blocks. And so like we wound up overshooting it. And my friend was with me, and I had met her on the trip. We're now friends. And she was talking to these guys, and I'm like, who is she talking to? And I didn't even realize that they were police officers, because they're wearing khaki shirts and some shorts. And they're like, "Hey, you want to do a selfie?" And I was just like, this would never happen in my country. Like,
Yeah.
ever.
The police in other countries are so nice. I
Yes.
mean, even the ones that carry around the big guns
Oh,
and they
yeah.
guard
Yeah.
stuff.
Yep.
Like me and my son will be about to cross the street and they'll go out there and stop all the traffic.
Yeah.
Anything else you need? How can I help you? It was just like, Americana, Americana,
Mhm.
so and you're like, you being conditioned to being afraid of the police,
Yes.
you're kind of like, am I supposed to talk? Like,
Yeah.
am I supposed to say
Yeah.
anything? Can I touch anything? Like,
Yeah.
and the police, they're just friendly.
Mm-hmm.
They
And that's the
are,
thing, it's wedded in our psyche to be afraid,
yeah,
right?
yeah. They are truly there to protect and serve. Now, I'm not
Mhm.
going to say they won't take bribes. Uh,
Mhm.
they may take a few dollars, and you don't have to get a ticket. Um, but that's just kind of how they talked about the toilet paper versus getting shot. I'm actually okay with giving you, $5 or $10,
Mhm.
you know, and I just drive off because I don't want
Yeah,
to have to go to court anyway.
yeah.
But that's pretty much my worry. I don't
Mhm.
typically have to worry about walking at night. It's
Mhm.
not something I typically do, but if
Mhm.
I need to run out to the store, or I need to do something, it's safe, as long as you use your regular common sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
It
don't do anything
is
out of
safe.
pocket, but
Right.
general safety, you don't have to worry with the police, and even with, like, healthcare, that was another big thing for me when I narrowed down my list. And last year when I was in Portugal, and, the Uber drivers, I love conversation with Uber drivers in the countries I'm in, because they tell you so much,
Yes,
right? Like,
everything.
New Zealand, I remember when I got in an Uber, the gentleman was telling me, he's like, "Oh, yeah, um, he has this money in his KiwiSaver account." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And he's like, "Oh, a bank account. You can use it to uh, go to college or buy a house." And I was like, "Oh, I'm thinking, oh, it's like maybe like a retirement fund, trying to make a connection." And he's like, yeah, the government puts money in it every month. And I was like, your government puts money in it? I
Right.
was like, wait, they don't take the money like our government does? Because I work and they cut off the top. I have no control over that.
Right.
I mean, it's not to say that they don't take taxes in New Zealand, but I was just like, wait, there is a mechanism for them to invest in your future? What? And then when I was in Porto last year, and it was the Uber driver's first day, all right? I think it was his first ride. And he's showing off, Porto and such pride. And we're getting close to where my Airbnb was. And he points down this road and he says, oh, if anything happens, you get sick or, have an accident, he's like, hospital's just down there. And I said, oh, okay, and he said, oh, I just want you to know because, unlike in your country, like, it's free. And I was
Right. Right.
they have no problem throwing shade.
Talking about, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm like, that's why when people are like, well, everybody wants to come and live in America. No, I've encountered a large number of individuals that wonder why I would like to live in America. Like, aren't you afraid there? I'm like, yeah, now that you say it, I am pretty afraid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's so it's interesting that with the beauty of the world being big, but it's also very small, right? At the same time, is that many of us are now finding new opportunities. So we're leaving toxic jobs or toxic relationships, and we're pursuing, financial independence. Looking at these concepts that either we didn't think were where we could fit in, or even dare to dream. Going back to what you said earlier. But I think that this is such a unique time to challenge your own beliefs, to sit in the uncomfortable, right? Whether it be lack of toilet paper or something with water or whatever, right? Like challenge your assumptions and start to push yourself to discover what is possible, because there's so much here that, we can learn from each other. And then, with one another as we go and travel to different places, we find that we have more things in common than that separates us.
Yes.
And as Black Americans, even though my platform is for people across the diaspora, the majority of them are Black Americans. For us, we've existed in this country where, for many of us, we've either been treated as we're invisible, or there's been a level of hypervigilance, microaggressions, over policing. And so just to be able to be in another country, we automatically default to this. Well, what is it like for Black people there? Because we know that, anti-Blackness and racism exists. But out of the countries that I've traveled to, and I don't know if this is true for you, is that oftentimes it is your nationality that
Exactly.
really precedes anything else. And even despite the track record of America and how we feel and interpret it, it still has some cachet with the rest of the world. And so you do have this level of privilege that for many of us, we have not considered ourselves as part of the privileged.
Yeah, I would say that's true. I mean, before they see anything else, they see you're American.
Mhm.
You're American, and they see dollar signs
Mhm.
a lot of times. So, you get treated a certain way. You become, you go from being Black in America to being American anywhere else, and you now become part of that privileged society of
Mhm.
individuals.
Mhm.
I lived in a Dominican Republic for a little while, and it was very interesting. For those that know their history, they have this, I can't even say love, hate relationship with Haitians.
Mm.
And, I know a lot of I know of Black Americans that's gone over there. And if they're of a darker complexion, they have gotten nasty stares and,
Mhm.
things of that nature until they open their mouths. And then once they open their mouth and speak, they said you can see the change, like it's an instant change of how they treat you because
Yes.
they realize you're not Haitian, you're American.
Mhm.
Sad, and the reason why I wouldn't live in Dominican Republic for good, because I just don't agree with that.
Exactly.
Um, but that is how they function. It is American first, and somewhere there's black. But at the end of the day, you're American.
Mhm.
So it's very, very different. One thing I wanted to touch on, because someone asked this, and I wanted to go back because I wanted to make sure we answered it. They wanted to know, let's see if I can find it. It was about savings and how much you need to leave the country, the minimal amount of savings a person should have when they're thinking about relocating to a different country.
Yeah.
What is your response on that? What's your take?
Ooh, it's a great question. It's a popular question, and that's going to be the answer is going to be it depends, right? So it depends on where you're going to live. And I'll give an example. My most recent episode is with Grace Rush, who is in our Blaxit Global Passport community. And she was living in the States in South Philly and moved, and she now is in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. If you listen to that episode, she gives numbers, right? The $200 a month apartment, right? and eating out for $1 per meal. Um, and for someone like that or who goes to Southeast Asia, you can probably live very comfortably for less than $1,000 a month. So I would say that at the very least, you would want to understand what's your level of comfort. Do you feel like you need to have 6 months to get you on your feet, right? And I would also recommend 6 months as a backup fund because you might go there, you might have to move, you may not like it, you may need to return home for whatever reason. I am always a proponent of saving and investing so that you don't have to do a GoFundMe and all this other stuff, right? So for me, it depends on what your level of comfort and how you plan to support yourself when you're abroad. Will there be a job that's transferring you? Will you be teaching online, have a side hustle, etc.? But there are a lot of tools and resources. We have our Move Abroad starter kit. There's a lot of tools and online tools too to help you research what the cost of living is in the areas that you're considering. And you can say, hey, based on this amount of money that I have, or this amount of money I'm willing to spend, this is how much I feel safe. I don't feel, me personally, I don't want to leave with less than a year because I already know that less than that would make me feel uncomfortable. For some people, they think 3 months is sufficient. It's going to be different for everybody. Just like for my apartment, as I'm looking, can I afford maybe on the higher end of the number? Yes. But like where I am now, I pay a lot of money for where I live. I'm at home 20 to 22 hours out of every 24 hours. So it's like, okay, it's not like I'm paying money for an apartment and I'm leaving to go to an office half the day and then commuting, right? But when I'm in Europe, I'm gonna have the exact opposite experience. I just wanna be in there to eat breakfast and sleep, right? So I don't wanna be at the top of my price range because I'd rather spend that money renting a yacht for a couple hours or, going golfing or whatever it is that I've envisioned for that next phase of life. And so I always tell people we have workshops on that in our Blaxit Global Passport community. But, do spend the time thinking about what it is that you want out of this next experience, come up with that budget of items, maybe not put numbers yet, but at least items, then go to those online tools and, loop in and see and validate, and then also get in community. And that's where you're going to find expats who, like, we have them in because we have a lot of people in our group that are moving to Portugal, and they come in and it's like, okay, well, how much is this? How would I need to that? And that's where you torture the assumptions and, like, am I on the right path, or do I need to save a little bit more? What I will also say in closing is, don't overthink it, right? Don't think that you've got to this point, but, oh, if I wait another couple months, I might. You're always going to keep moving that yardstick. I'm guilty of that too. Look, I'm supposed to be on a plane in a couple months. And then there's like those moments, even for me, where I'm like, but da, 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 da. It happens. But that's where you can say, and you lean on your community, you lean on somebody who's done it already, and they're like, that's okay. That's natural. I've been through that. Whew, right? Nervous system calms down, you move forward.
And I agree with all of that. I would say to build on that, it also, uh, I think it was Roshida that says, the way that you live in America is probably going to be the way that you're going to live overseas.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, that does change. But when I felt like I was going to go live with a local and I lived like a local, I realized I can't live like a local. I have to live
Yeah, there's certain things, yes.
like I need to live in the condo. I had the house. I don't have a house anymore. I rent, I sell, I do all of that.
Mhm.
But I had the house, but I realized I'm good in a 2-bedroom condo with a pool, a community area, a condo, or apartment that's kind of like a condo. Yeah. It's good. That works for me. Also, but I also have a son. Now, if you're single, you may do hostels. You can get a hostel for $20 a night.
Yeah.
You may do hostels. Even in more expensive places, your hostel is still probably going to be under $100 a night. Cheaper if you do weekly. So you can do hostels. There are different things that you can do to adjust your budget accordingly, especially if you're traveling without children. So I think that's something to think about. Also, what is your traveling style? Like, you have scoped out where you want to live. You're going to Portugal. You're paying monthly rent, I would assume. If you're living like I live, I don't know where I'll tell you where I'm going. I don't know how long I'm staying. I have cut. At this point, I try to stay at least a month. A month is going to be less expensive than 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah. But guess what? A 6 or 12-month lease is going to be less expensive than a monthly lease. If you're bopping around as a traveling nomad, you have to now worry about, you have to pay for your bus, your train, your plane. So you need to put that in your budget as well. So the more you bop around, the more you got to do it. There are some people that, I know one lady, she's in Mexico. We're Facebook friends, and she just rides the bus everywhere. Mexico is a very bus-friendly place. You can jump on the bus, and for a few pesos, you go from place to place.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very simple. If you're a backpacker, you can do that. But yeah, very, very simple to travel all of Mexico. And once you get into Mexico, plane fare is very inexpensive. So those are things that you think about. In my opinion, have your money to cover. Well, and one more thing I will say, are you working or are you on a sabbatical?
Yeah. That is important. Yeah. And what other things you have to factor in? Like, for me, I'm paying college tuition, right? But, and what is the healthcare system? Is it one that you can access? Do you need to have private insurance, right? Those are the things that you'd have to think of. But again, it's like your level of comfort and your intended plans. To your point, slow travel, bop around. You can also hack, right? Stephanie's a big proponent of house sitting. There's a lot of different ways you can do this to make it where it's affordable. And, like I said, whether it's, countries on the continent or Southeast Asia where it's really affordable, or Mexico. But I'm hearing Mexico is getting a little expensive because a lot of Americans are trying to come in there. But you can still make it where you can have that transition at a rate that's affordable for you. And where you start isn't necessarily where you finish.
Yeah, because there's some people they're like, I'm out of here, and they leave with $1,000.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And to your point, like maybe you just need a couple months that's away. Maybe you want to study abroad. Maybe you want to go to another country and have an experience to learn a new language. I was talking to my guest yesterday on my platform, and she was saying she's an attorney. And she said, "Yeah, there's no student loans here. So maybe you want to go to Italy or Portugal and learn the language, right? Take a class." There's just a lot of different paths. But I think if you do the due diligence in the upfront, get locked into the community, definitely torture the assumptions, you can find a place where you can live comfortably.
Yep.
And for many of us, I think it goes back to something I mentioned earlier about being in survival mode. Sometimes for many of us, we've been in survival mode for so long that became the default and the baseline, and you don't even realize you've been in survival mode. And so, from here, like I'll give an example. I went to see my mom in February, and she's in Florida, right? For my daughter and I, the plane tickets were like $1,200. It's Florida, from New Jersey to Florida, right?
Wow.
I could fly to a lot of different countries, and I have, right, for less than that. But a round trip ticket from Lisbon to Paris is 60 euros.
Right.
Right. And so that's why it's important for you to think about and not, get so wedded to how much it costs your life in the States. And to your point, Charisma, your lifestyle, there are going to be things that your creature comforts that you're going to want to have, maybe an elevated experience, possibly compared to locals. But at the same time, you want to realize that you want to leave room for some of the things that you have yet to experience that are actually more attainable than you'd ever thought possible.
Yeah. And consider that whatever you're paying right now, most places are going to be cheaper
Yeah.
for the same comforts.
Yes.
That condo in Atlanta, I'm not paying for that condo in Atlanta, but that same condo somewhere else, I'm royalty there because these coins go very far.
I'm looking forward to getting rid of my apartment, my car. I'm like, look, I will be taking these size 11s and walking up them hills in Portugal. I have no problem being a pedestrian. Like, oh,
Yes.
man,
Yep.
yes,
The bus, the train,
yes.
all these things I don't use locally. That's how you save money. So I would say at least have, if you're planning, if you have a place you want to go, have about 6 months to pay for everything, and maybe even I'm big on having not even a rainy day, a tsunami type day. So put that 2 or 3 months in a savings that you never touch. Personally, I would say a high interest savings, but that's just me. And put that away and use it as something you never touch.
Yes.
Even if it's just a sabbatical, you can do 6 months. Or you can take the money that you have and find a location based off your budget instead of basing your budget off the location.
Yes. Very true.
Yeah. So Lauren said some hostels barter with people. My cousin is a professional photographer, and the hostels let him stay there rent free with a private room and bath because he takes the photos for their website. I had a guest, she does house sitting as well, Diamond. And when she first left, she left and she stayed in Mexico for 5 months as a house sitter. And that's how she left. And she said while she was there, she figured out her next move.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's your biggest expense is living.
Exactly. And there's volunteer programs. There's, where you can work a farm or whatever in exchange for, room and board. I mean, there's a myriad of different ways, and some things you're going to be like, yeah, and some things you're going to be like, that's not for me, but you, right? And I will also caveat that though, and say that part of the journey is self-discovery, because
Mhm.
we'll find, at least, for anybody who's listening to the podcast, I've talked about it. When I went to New Zealand, I hiked a volcano and I zip lined. I'm afraid of heights. I kayaked. I don't know how to swim, right? I've gone to Curacao and paddleboard and fell into the ocean. And I was panicked, right? But I'm still here. And so all that is to say is that you will, on this journey, discover parts of yourself that either lay dormant, or that were once there but were dormant for some time, or that because you're in a different environment are allowed to flourish in a new way. And so, like I said, if you can lean into that aspect of curiosity, that is where you will reap the greatest rewards.
I agree. You discover so much about yourself when you exit the rat race.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And if you want to retire early, you figure out your baseline budget, multiply that by 25, right? Your baseline budget, make that an annual number, multiply that by 25. That's your freedom number. And so you might look at your accounts and say, hey, I've got my freedom number. All it takes is doing the math.
Right. KF said for most people, just selling your car alone will free up car payment and car insurance, gas expenses that may cover rent in some countries. So there's
Yes.
another tidbit.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
I,
America keeps you tied to systems, whether we like to believe it or not. We have like I talked about, right, the taxes systems in terms of taxes, or, healthcare is tied to your employment, all of this stuff. And it keeps you where you can't break free. You're on that toxic job, but you have that mortgage or that car payment or that student loan, or, all of these things. And the more that you can start to extricate yourself from the dependency on those systems, is the more space that you'll be able to devote to that, like, work I was talking about earlier. And then also reap the financial rewards, because you'll be like, oh, I'm not paying all this money on my credit card or my car loan or this. It's like, oh, wow, it actually is attainable. But for many of us, that wheel is going so fast, it's really hard to even think about what's on the other side of that.
yeah, and there's so many things. So I'm gonna wrap this up because I kept Krishan way longer than I told her I will. She's been so wonderful.
Thank you.
So I want to touch on a few things. If you're interested in house sitting, there is a link below for Trusted House Sitter. You get 25% off. And there's insurance. So Krishan, she will be able to get her insurance in Portugal. If you like me and you kind of move around, you want to take the insurance with you. There is a link below. That one is, I think, $40 a month.
Ooh,
And because I'm accident prone, I've used it and it paid for everything.
wow. Yeah, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yes. And I want you to tell us, because you mentioned your community. Can
Yes.
you tell us how we find out more about your community?
Yeah, I can pass you a link. It's called Blaxit Global Passport.
Mhm.
You can click on the link. You can come in free for 2 weeks and see if it's right for you. And yeah, we have accountability check-ins for male travelers and expats. There's a men's group that I do not run. um, and we have workshops, we have different speakers, we plug in, different events. So even things that aren't on my platform, for example, like the upcoming meetup with Black in Portugal and our Black Utopia in Portugal. So we really try to stay plugged into the community. so that people have like a good breadth of information. So I just popped that in there for you, Charisma. But if you click on that link or if you go to our YouTube page, you can get all that as well as listen to the Blaxit Global podcast.
Okay. So I will add that link on there for you all. So you'll have that. If you like this, make sure you like and share it with someone that you probably know could use this discussion. They need to hear this, even if it's your mom that doesn't agree that you should be traveling across seas. Um,
I've
so
had that conversation with my mom too.
yes, me too. So make sure you do that. But also, definitely go to Miss Chrishan's information. It is at Blaxit Global. You can find that on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Your podcasts are on every medium, isn't it?
Yes.
Apple,
Yes.
Spotify, all of that.
Yep.
So definitely go there. She has a multitude of guests. She's been doing this for a few years now. So I
Mhm.
promise you, any and everything you want to know about, she has a guest for. When I have a question, I'll go and does she have somebody? Oh, okay, there goes one right there. Let me take a listen while I'm doing these dishes. So, thank you so much for coming on. You know, people don't realize that when you're growing your YouTube and you have these people that are kind of way up here in the YouTube world, you get so nervous about inviting you all on, but y'all are real people.
Oh yeah, and I'm flattered that you even put me up there because I'm a new YouTuber too.
So, but I'm just so happy that you came on and you shared with us. And I wish you best of success in Portugal and keep us updated because you don't talk about you that often.
I don't actually. That's why when you asked me, I'm like, ooh, this is going to be more about me. Okay, I think I could be vulnerable. And so you've been great. I know I've had the honor of having you as a guest on my show, but I definitely, want to be and I am in deep gratitude for you extending an invitation to your audience and being on your platform. Your remarkable journey is inspiring on so many levels. And so, it's like right back at you. I know that, the things that are coming down the pike for you and your family is just going to set you up for success. And I look forward to watching it continue to unfold. I want to have you on my YouTube channel, right? So we can keep this conversation and love fest going. But
Yeah.
it's really been an honor to be here with you today.
Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming. All right, y'all. We're going to sign off. Ciao.
Thanks for tuning in.